Good evening. It is 5:01. I would like to call to order the special board meeting for Thursday, January 16th. Mrs. Shope, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Present?
Tom Hankins,
Here.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
Amy Levy, Brian Nichols,
Here.
and Tia Johnson.
Present.
And I'll call one more time for Amy Levy. I see her on the screen, but we're not getting a response. So all members are present, with the exception of Amy Levy until she indicates she's present.
Thank you. May I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Brian Nichols, seconded by Tom Hankins. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Mrs. Shope, are there any public comments tonight?
I do not have any in the room, and I have one that has come in via email.
Okay, do you mind reading it and
Nope, I
letting
don't
us know
mind.
who it's from?
Okay, the email is from Bill Williams. The Beloit Public Schools can't even teach reading, writing, and basic math skills adequately anymore, and they want another $40 million. No, not until they actually show that they have the ability to teach these very basic and very necessary subjects to our young people. Please vote no on spending millions while more scores are so abysmal in this school district. Thank you, Bill. There is a PS. The Beloit schools have been so poorly operated and the results so abysmal that we would like a full refund for our last 10 years, the school portion of our property taxes.
Thank you, Mrs. Shope. Are there any other public comments? Thank you. Our next agenda item is the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed the revenue limit. Mrs. Levy, do you have a question or comment?
I have a question. Thank you so much. Is there a reason that there is an A and a B? Because my assumption, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that B is the proposed question as it would appear on the ballot. So I'm just wondering, is there a legal reason why we have to approve or deal with, approve or decline on A and B? And then my second question for B, and Dr. Garrison, I guess this is for you because my assumption is that you had the contact with legal to get this vetted. Do we have any leeway to streamline that language in the opening just so it's easier for the public to read on the ballot, or is more straightforward? So those are my two questions. Do we need both A and B? And if no, do we have any leeway to streamline B so it's more reader friendly? Thank you.
So to answer your question about A, this is the way legal told me to, of course, post the information, and so I just used what legal directed me to do. This is also the process that they shared with me from last year as well. So I don't have any legal reasons to why we have A and B outside of this is the way legal asked me to present it. Mr. Chady may be able to share more details about it. I just took from what legal, and then I'll answer B after Mr. Chady is able to respond.
Yeah, so Resolution 3A, the resolution actually adopts the language that the board would like to place on the ballot. 3B is the resolution to actually put forward that question onto the election ballot. So it's a two-step process. You both have to adopt the question and then actually physically place it on the ballot. And with regards to the brevity, if there's any brevity that can be done to the proposed question, it would be after the dollar values and the years when we get into the purposes, not prior to that. That's pretty standard language that's used throughout the state.
Thank you.
So I think Mr. Chady answered your B as well. So That concludes my questions from Mrs. Levy for now. Just joking. Thank you.
Thank you. So the purpose of tonight's discussion is to gain approval of the resolution for exceeding the revenue limit for 3 years for a spring referendum. The background information is the school district of Beloit faces budgetary constraints leading into the 25-26 school year. These budgetary needs have been expressed throughout the 23-24 school years, leading us to a potential 2025 referendum question. Dr. Garrison?
Yes, ma'am. And so, first of all, thank you, board, for your time and dedication in this space over the past year and more, of course. My hopes is that tonight we'll answer any additional questions that you may have and possibility of a vote. One of the things that we have tried to do over the course of these past, few months is, gather information and naturally move from information to action. And then here we are in this space tonight. When we dated back, I just want to give you a quick snapshot. When we dated back looking at a timeline, we knew that we were working up against a pretty tight timeline. But what we also knew is that our district's finances and some of those conversations have been consistent over many years, and our needs have been expressed in many different platforms. My hopes tonight is that we, again, are able to kind of, walk through any questions that you may have, and then, of course, we will, let the board kind of go from there. Tonight, we also wanted to make sure that everyone is aware, from last week to this week, of course, some things changed. And so when you have those moving targets, naturally scenarios changed. And when scenarios change, the dollar values changed. Even from Monday to Tuesday, they changed. And so here we are tonight with a scenario snapshot of what it could cost based off of H2, which was the consensus in the room on Tuesday when we had this discussion. And so what I wanted to do was provide additional details based off of some questions that came to me from the aspect of how the money will be spent. The good thing about it is in all of our presentations we've had the priorities broke down as it pertains to cost. And once we kind of landed in this H2 space, we were able to kind of pull that information back to this document to give more specifics around how much things will cost. Now, please know these are estimated priority costs. Naturally, we always use that word estimated there because that's the natural conversation that we have, knowing that sometimes we estimate right to the number and sometimes it's much lower based off of if we're able to get, certain, people in. On this first slide here, from a compensation perspective, we did go back and add that 5% across all salary schedules to give you that snapshot of year 1, year 2, year 3, and the totals in which it will cost over a 3-year time frame. In that space, please note that you have the 3% increases that we also built into our budget model that we use for our benefits and just that annual cost of things possibly going up. So you will see here the totals that will be for all employee groups. Now, with that being stated, of course, this is not a negotiated space, so naturally the board could say, we want to do 5% for teachers, 4% for, administrative staff, just giving you an example. Or we can do 5% for all teachers, and, year 1 and year 2, you can say you want to do 4% for everybody. That 5% was the top number that we used for this model based off of what the board was giving us as it pertains to feedback. That's a space that I just want to make sure we share. We've shared that before. That 5 was just the numbers that we used to build out our scenarios. Before I move forward, I want to make sure I capture any questions just from this snapshot here.
Do any board members have questions on the staff compensation and retention costs?
Dr. Garrison or Mr. Chady, does that include benefits, or is that just the wage increase?
That includes benefits.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Dr. Garrison.
Thank you. So that gives us the snapshot for the 5% across H2 scenario. Now, what I could have did was pull up the H2 scenario, but we've got those scenario sheets out. I can kind of tell across the board here, and if you want me to pull up that scenario too for everyone's viewing purposes, I'll be able to close it off and show everybody. But that's scenario for H2 scenario. And the next two buckets, next priority we have is our academic bucket and our behavioral cost estimated breakdown. And what we did was we used the presentation that we currently had, we rolled those conversations over, and you see the cost of what things will be for literacy, integrated technology reading intervention, American Reading Company, ebooks, replenishment, Act 20, professional learning training, and virtual reading tutors. That's the reading literacy bucket, followed by our math bucket. I apologize, I couldn't squeeze this all on one slide. But the math bucket also came to the Eureka Math and the Imagine Math, totaling this 3-year total here, which is $1.68 million. That's the 3-year total. The next, I'm sorry, is there any questions of what? Well, let me finish this whole bucket, and I'll take questions after that, Miss. Thank you. The next bucket we have is our behavioral support bucket. Now, what we wanted to go back and do, since we know that behavioral was a space that we've heard from in different spaces, and we wanted to make sure we captured that. And one of the things that we did was, of course, we kept the 6 behavioral support positions there. Those are pretty much like teacher positions, added to the behavioral conversation. And of course, we wanted to look at the assistant principal being brought back at the high school. That's a 3-year total. Please understand that $351,000 is not for 1 year for an assistant principal. The two dean of students position is again a 3-year total, $375,000, and then we added the conversation with the 6 paraprofessional support positions, and we believe that 6 paraprofessional support positions could be used in tandem with the behavioral support person, along with the para person working closely with student and teacher behaviors, teacher learning opportunities. If you look at that priority bucket, it'll cost us over the 3-year time frame of $2.84 million, which if you add up the $2.841 million plus the $1.68 million, you get the $4.5 million conversation. Now, to those of you that looking at our H2 scenario, you'll see that $1.669 million number of new stuff. Do you mind if I kind of cheat off here? I'm sorry, I don't have mine pulled up. Oh, perfect. Thank you. If you pull up if anyone's following along on the H2 scenario, you'll see that $1.669 million of new additional stuff. That $1.669 million conversation is year 1, year 2, year 3. You multiply that times 3, you got $5 million, $5,007,000 to be exact, and then you subtract the 451, and that's where you'll get all remaining funds could be utilized for addressing district maintenance needs and or deposited into fund balance, okay? And so I tried to make it so that people understood exactly where the money will be spent, and of course, these have been the conversations that we've been having, and we want to be as clear as we needed to be in that space. So that gives us a snapshot, very clean snapshot, I believe, around how the money could be spent in the priority buckets 1 and priority buckets 2. And I will turn it over for any questions that the board may have.
Do board members have any questions? Megan Miller?
Thank you so much. I know you've discussed this already, and we've covered this at several meetings, but just for the sake of kind of synthesizing all of this information together, the last statement on the last slide that you have up here that talks about how all remaining funds could be utilized for addressing either district maintenance needs and or deposited into fund balance. I think there is a space to build some understanding with the community here around what that means. And I know we have just recently talked about maintenance costs, but does somebody want to give us just kind of the gist or kind of the snapshot of what we're looking at over the next couple of years so people understand that that's a reasonably sized number?
So to be honest, it's about $400,000 or so that's left over in this 3-year bucket conversation in that $1.669 million conversation. So that's will that carry us in fund balance? One could argue no. But when you look at the scenario H2, you see that in each year in our projected surplus and deficit conversation, you got $91,000 in year one, about a little over $1 million in year two, and a little over $200,000 in year three. That very small amount could be rolled into the fund balance conversation to kind of bring that $1.69 million total to about, and one could argue if we use all of the $400,000, could be a little close to about $2 million that we could possibly save over these course of these 3 years. We do know that minus a referendum at all, we are about a $6.2 million deficit. That's for year one. And in year two, 26, 27, the district would run into, the possibilities of not being able to fund ourselves. And that's the conversation that we had last week around not having fund balance. And in that case, one could argue we're getting real close to bankruptcy. That's the reason why fund balance is very important. And again, from year one to year two, that's $6 million. I think to be exact, year two deficit is a little over $8 million. And so we're looking at, minus a referendum, not just a $6.6 million deficit. We're really looking at plus 8, because January of next year, we still got to have $8 million of reductions. So that's $14 million that we'll be talking about having to reduce again. And so in that space, again, we're looking at some drastic measures that the school district cannot keep affording to work itself through. As a matter of fact, as it pertains to any of our goals, we wouldn't be able to possibly reach any of those, because now you're talking about, again, cutting multiple staff in many different areas. That includes teachers, while retention could possibly necessarily go away because we won't be able to retain people when the year-over-year cuts are still is would have to be a focus. I would just hope that when you see that, that the $400,000 or so that we were able to move into fund balance or possibly use for maintenance needs, it's not a large amount, but it is putting back something to kind of help us in that area of the projected surplus and or deficit.
May I ask a brief clarifying question? Thank you so much. Dr. Garrison, that was a fabulous kind of overview that helps, I think, us understand fund balance and why that's on there, because I know that people have reacted sort of negatively in the past to the idea that we would use money toward fund balance, so I appreciate the explanation. I just want to clarify my question because I don't think I asked it very clearly. I was just wondering if you could just remind us about like the gist of around the total of maintenance needs that we might see over the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah, it's a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, our maintenance needs will have to come in a much greater capital conversation, because right now, this is not in any of the buckets. I know we have some, pressing needs, but the board has really identified retention and paying our staff as being a very top priority based off of the scenarios that we've been able to present. The buckets that the priorities that we were able to produce, that was over in a $2 million number with just some things that we needed to take care of just right now. That conversation will need to be brought back, and again, in a much greater capital conversation in which we will tackle some of those things that was in our presentation, along with some other of our, 5 to 10 year plan opportunities that our district has. And so, Mrs. Miller, it wouldn't touch many things at all.
I appreciate you clarifying that, because I just don't want people to have the misunderstanding that we're asking for more than we need. And so I really appreciate you adding that context of the importance not only of mitigating any cliff that we might encounter at the end of the length of the referendum, as well as just keeping a reasonable sense of wiggle room or margin of wiggle room to deal with facilities. I know we've made a lot of important safety infrastructure investments over the last several years. I mean, when we talk about student safety, part of that is building maintenance safety as well. And so I just really appreciate you sharing that, and I think you've helped clarify the point I was hoping to make. Thank you.
I want to just add, because I don't want to leave this out, Mrs. Johnson. The district, year one, we did go to referendum, and we weren't able to get that one passed. that would have, it wasn't going to give us everything that we needed in that referendum. It would have got us to keep a mill rate around 478 and use some extra dollars to put back towards our fund balance. Year two, we didn't ask for what we needed as well. We did the cuts and the $9 million conversation, and here we are again, right? And so in this snapshot, this is the first time since I've been here where we kind of have asked what we need to maintain and survive what we're currently doing. My hopes is that, you know, people see even in the surplus area, not 91,000, that's a modest surplus in year one, and the $1 million is a modest surplus, definitely a great surplus in year two. Year three, you know, a little over $200,000. But, you know, we have a district budget that's floating between, you know, we went from 100, let's say 110 million and down to almost, you know, under 90 million over the years. And so we've had major just, you know, reductions over the years. And so this is our first time coming to the public with a request that we've heard from different pockets of people as it pertains to what they would possibly support, and still gives us some just a little wiggle room in each year based off of a scenario H2 and where the board kind of has landed. And so I just want to make sure I note that too, that, you know, last year we did not ask for what we needed. Okay, we asked for what we thought would pass, and we still had to do those reductions. Even with a past referendum, there would have been reductions. And so it was a little more drastic because we didn't get the referendum, right? And so that's the space that we had to, you know, of course, work from. I just want to make sure I note that. Thank you.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Garrison and maybe Dee Dee, obviously hiring is a very competitive market right now, and just because we allocate monies for hiring all these different positions, you know, doesn't make it so, and they're gonna pop up onto our screen and be filled. My question is, and I know we have positions that are open right now, I'm wondering what happens to those dollars that were allocated, but we can't find someone, you know, a prospect that would fill that need. Where does that money go?
Mrs. Almendarez?
Sorry. So that money really is budgeted and simply not used. Another benefit of the referendum and trying to increase recruitment and retention, it would allow us to potentially consider how our increase in wages can impact people's decisions to come to our district versus next door or over the state line. So it is a benefit. That money would just remain in that pool.
Okay, just it won't get transferred to the general fund balance, or it stays within your or the employee as a benefit to employees only. I mean, we talked just. I'm not trying to make a big deal about it, but what Dr. Garrison just talked about, if there's a 400,000, I think it was, that could go into maintenance if we don't spend it. Not a concern, it's a question. If all these different positions that we are going to get money for, if you can't fill them, does that stay in a fund somewhere? And
So,
go ahead.
So great question. So the question that you're answering is based off of attrition and, of course, attraction is what I like to call it. Can we get the people here? If we're in every year, there's positions that are unfortunately left open here in our school district, and that money is used in many different ways. One of the ways it's used is to help us with our budget, because that money is rolled back over into our negative that we run into on a regular basis because of our funding here in the school district being what it is. So if we don't hire for the position, that savings does come back to us. It doesn't go away. No, it doesn't go away because that's what was allocated. That's what the money was allocated for. Now, from a year-to-year perspective, and I know Mr. Chady can probably answer this a little bit better than me, but from a year-to-year perspective, we sometimes have to rely on those funds being there at the end of the year based off of the time of the year. So let's just say we get to March and we still don't have X teacher. Now, March turns into April. Chances are we probably won't hire that position. That money comes in for us in the form of a savings because we got through the year. You know, that's not what we wanted, but we got through the year with a savings of, let's just say, said teacher $68,000 with benefits. And that money comes in the form of a savings to us because we don't have a large fund balance, you know, sitting there from, you know, year to year. And then we use that money to, you know, to move towards our fund balance. And so I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does, and I think that's what my point was, that if we can't hire people, that this money that is being allocated to those positions will go back and not be allocated to, because we can't find a competent person to hire, that money also will go back into the fund balance.
I would like to add, if possible, we also have to look at the full picture of when we don't hire a position. There are other teachers, for example, that may be giving up their prep time. And so those are costs that are associated with not filling a position. So it's not like we save a full $68,000 because we didn't hire a teacher. There are others that are helping to cover, whether it's students being moved to other classrooms, et cetera. There's overages, there's overload pay, there are blue sheets. There are different ways of compensating whenever they give up a prep time or extend their classroom.
Okay, thank you. But, you know, I guess the answer would be, you know, we got to look at the slide that's up there. If we don't hire these people, because you can't, or for whatever reason there's not a person who applies for it, that's a lot of dollars that could go. Does it stay in our budget
No.
for that year, and then the next year you try again, and the next year you try again?
Right. It's not like it rolls over into, it's not like HR has a surplus of X amount of money to use the following year. So it does get reallocated as needed.
And so that's something that the board, I mean, Bob, or Mr. Chady would keep us apprised of, because I know that, Dr. Garrison, I don't think I'm saying anything, you've already said it, you know, that these vacancies that we have currently, I think you said till March. I know you use a baseball analogy. When baseball season starts, if you haven't hired by then that money goes back into the fund balance that we have allocated for that. And with that in mind, are we doing the same thing with these referendum dollars if we can't hire someone for that?
That's a great question that you ask. You know, so looking at the slide, it talks about 6 behavioral support positions. We'll just use that as an example. Very valid point, right? Are we going to be able to find 6 quality individuals that we can bring on board to help reduce our behavioral and academic needs? Great question. Yes, the resources could go to fund balance, but before they do that, so we're going to budget for those positions and hope that we have them hired and filled for the start of the school year. But maybe not, right? I mean, that's your concern. Maybe they get filled in the fall. Maybe they're still open after the first of the year. Maybe they're still open even at the end of the school year. If they are, then those resources, could flow to the fund balance and help replenish that. But even before doing that, and maybe even earlier in the process, I would say we're directing these resources to meet these academic and behavioral support needs. Let's not handcuff ourselves to filling positions. Maybe we need to reallocate to prioritize those resources to meet academic and behavioral support needs in other fashions.
Would that shift, if it happened, would that be brought to the board? Would you alert us that we're going to shift this money?
Well, I would
I'm
think
not
that
trying to handcuff you, I just want to know.
I would think that would route through the appropriate committee, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Brian Nichols?
Yes, thank you. Another clarifying question, Mr. Shady, on that slide. Does that also include benefits for all those positions?
I'm sorry. Yes, those positions are included with, just like on the previous, on our main presentation, we had that added. And this is the same thing.
Okay.
Is that it, Brian?
For now.
Okay. This, any other board questions or comments? One of my concerns with this, I'm all for looking at improving our behaviors and absolutely our academics. We want our students to do the best they possibly can and be the best students they possibly can. A concern of mine is we did used to have behavioral specialists in the district, and those positions, I believe, became assistant principal positions, where the assistant principal was to address more of the behaviors, and the principals were supposed to address more of the academics. So that arrangement, it sounds like, is insufficient to address our behavioral needs at this time. If we are not consistently using the code of conduct as appropriate throughout the district, how is having more behavioral support in the buildings going to change, ultimately moving us towards the goal we'd like to see? And then my next question is, with the paraprofessionals, and believe me, I strongly support paraprofessionals and having more, but if we can't get the paraprofessionals now, putting more money towards more positions, are we just going to have more open positions? I suggested last time perhaps hiring a recruiting specialist or something. I know our HR department took a big hit. I know our business and finance services department took a big hit this last budget cycle. So I'm a little concerned that we're not looking at putting a little bit more support back in those departments, and or maybe trying to balance out a little bit of the cuts, the reductions that were made in COLAC, so that department-wise, I mean, we are now, in effect, missing a complete department with our communications department, no one in there right now. So those are my questions and concerns.
You make some valid points. People necessarily doesn't mean the problem will be fixed. And I'll be the first to tell you that. I can tell you that without people in spaces where there could possibly be help, it magnifies the problem even more. I think right now there's going to be conversations that we have to continue to have internally in regards to not just behaviors, but also looking at the structures and more conversations around that. Our hopes is that with these positions, I believe that these positions, with new guidance, can be beneficial for our students and behavioral conversations, because again, one thing we do know is the behaviors aren't going away. We do know that there's a code of conduct that we will still need to enforce, and that's going to continue. We are working through our code of conduct. We do have referrals. We do have suspensions. We do have, those levels of different, disciplinary actions. But again, I'll be the first to tell you that we would love to know that adding more people could help us, but it's going to take much more than just people. there's going to have to be some structural changes in this conversation. And I believe that with additional support with some of our teachers in classrooms, that this could be a very, great opportunity for us to show to our community that we are working with the whole child conversation. Our paraprofessional support in the classroom could be a benefit to some of those classrooms that may have more challenging students, because sometimes it just balances out differently in different spaces. That behavioral support position, that's true. It did shift to assistant principals, but that's just one person. Right now, all of the discipline really falls into a few laps in the buildings, right? Principal, assistant principal, and sometimes, I say sometimes, our student services team, if they're available. They don't always go straight to the student services teams, i.e. counselors and or psychologists. It pretty much falls or lands with the administrators. And so these additional support opportunities in buildings that may need additional support provides another layer of, if the assistant principal is dealing with one major situation, we got a behavioral support specialist that can go and help, along with a paraprofessional that could be added to that classroom to provide additional support. Again, these are opportunities that we have in these spaces. And we know right now in our middle schools, we currently have one principal and one assistant principal. And when they used to have, of course, two. And it has been, challenging this year working through our middle school conversations. And so the two dean opportunities is a space in which we believe could be beneficial as well, based off of some of the conversations that even came from the public. And so that's a position there. Now, let's just do this, since that's a statement, Mrs. Johnson. You can minus 375,000, right? We can take that off. We could take off the 6 paraprofessional positions. That's another $1 million. It'll change the behavioral support package. I'll just give you an example. It'll lower this bottom number of 451,000, right? It would. But we will still probably have some behavioral concerns.
Yeah, and I understand that we can change that. My personal opinion is no, I would absolutely keep those dean positions at the middle school, because I know they are desperately needed with the reduction that of staff that we've had there. I do know that we also lost cut some of the secretarial positions at the middle school, and there's strain and extra work burden there as well. Ultimately, I guess my question or my point is, there are, if I have a factory and the goal of my factory is to make widgets, I don't know if adding more cogs in the system is going to make better widgets. What the system, we have to look at what we're doing. What is going to change? What are you, as the district administrator, going to do to get this system to be more effective and align with the direction we want to see the district going?
And that's a great question. Some of my response here is going to be very open-ended. Right now, minus any support in a referendum, it's going to be drastically hard to do anything, because we won't be able to pay for what we currently got. And so I just want to make sure that's the first space. Ms. Beebe, come to the mic, please. That's the first space. So currently what we're doing is we're trying our hardest to maintain what we currently have, with the staff we currently have, to get the job done. We want to be able to provide more professional learning around behaviorals and behavioral support in our buildings. We want to provide that. We, of course, had to back away from certain contracts and certain things based off of our needs, and so we haven't been able to do that, which is hard, because, again, you take away the funding for it, and then you still got the need, and then you struggle. Another thing that we would love to do is still work with our family and family services in our community. There's outreach that still needs to be done there. I'll be honest with you. There's work that I need to do better in that space because I believe that our community at large possibly do want to help us in different spaces. We've extended some of those conversations. We have, but maybe there's more that could be done there, especially in the behavioral opportunities that one could argue. The third thing that I think we could do better, and especially in the behavioral, let's just speak from a behavioral perspective right now, is how we talk about our students is very important. We have to communicate I have to do a better job at communicating the great things that are happening in our day-to-day basis in our school district. We used to do, 3 positive messages a day. Maybe that's not enough because some people believe that we are having major issues every single day of the week, and every single day. And maybe that's true, but we have 5,000 plus students. And if, let's just say 15 of them have a rough day, that's 15 of the 5,000. And I think we missed let's just say we missed the 4,885 students that's having a great day. And maybe we need to do a better job at communicating some of those excellent opportunities that are happening daily in our district. And I can ask Mrs. Beavers to share additional things that we are currently doing to support this conversation.
Okay, so I'm feeling like there's 2 different conversations being had because administration and student services are responsive to the behaviors when somebody violates the code of conduct. These positions, I think, should be looked at as building and supporting skills so that there is not a violation of the code of conduct. So think about like the EMLSS system and the multi-tiered system of supports in regards to academics, right? We have these coaches and these interventionists that are sitting in meetings and disaggregating data and then being responsive to that data and working with teachers and students to build the skills in reading, in literacy, and math, right? That's how I would see these positions really working. We talk about behavior in these meetings, but we don't have assigned individuals to go in and work directly with students or with teachers in regards to the data that they're analyzing. I don't know if does that help a little bit?
Yes, yeah, that does.
Okay.
Thank you. And then another question I had, Dr. Garrison, going back to the slide with these support, what's that? The priority to academics and behavioral support costs. We've got virtual reading tutors, $180,000 assigned there. What does $180,000 buy us in terms of virtual reading tutors? Explain to me why a virtual reading tutor is better than an in-person tutor.
Well, we of course would say I believe an in-person tutor would be great to have, and I can't say that one. I can't say that one would be better over the other, but I would personally prefer an in-person tutor if I was in this space. In this package with the virtual reading opportunity, I know Mrs. Mortek is currently over at doing the spelling bee right now, but the virtual reading tutors, as I understand it, is a space that's picking up in the world of being able for a lot of students to access tutors because we may not have them readily available here. And it's a hard space for me to, try to explain better than that. We would love to have tutors everywhere, in our city. But unfortunately, in the virtual space, I can be a tutor on the weekend if I wanted to. You could be a tutor on the weekend, and I log in, I sign on, and I'm working with whoever's on the other side of the screen. It just opens up access differently. And so the virtual reading space, that's the package that was brought to us. I do support it. Again, I would love to have in-person tutors as well.
Thank you. Brian Nichols? Go, I'm
Well, I was just going to ask. Excuse me. Greg, I apologize. I know I just want a quick question on that subject. So what data do we have to support the success of virtual tutors? What data do we have to support successful tutors? She's covering for you, Mrs. Shope. Thank you.
I don't have any data right now to support the statement around virtual tutors or the route to go forever. I don't have that data, but thank you for asking. And I can provide additional data as needed.
Mr. Schneider?
Well, my comments go back to the beginning of the discussion that we had on the behavior supports. And I guess I look at it this way. If we have a child that's in the school system in third grade, is not reading at grade level, we don't just punish that child. We provide the supports to teach them the skills that they need. With behaviors, I mean, yes, they have to deal with a code of conduct. So there is a consequence for the behaviors, but just to assume that because we give them a consequence, they're going to learn the appropriate behaviors would be like expecting somebody in third grade who can't read to on their own develop all of those skills that they need to move forward. We need that support to teach those skills so that they know the correct behaviors, the correct way to handle situations, and again, you know, begin to identify some of those other social and emotional concerns that exist. And if we don't have somebody who's trained in that, it's not really going to happen well. And so the advantage of putting those behavior supports is, it's just like the coaches that we use in math and in reading that we've heard at the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee on how great that the advantage is and how much good is coming from those coaches to coach both the students and the teachers. And that's really where these positions are. It's somebody who's trained in how to deal with those concerns and to teach them the skills they need so we don't have those behaviors again in the future.
I think another good point you make, Mr. Snyder and Mr. Nichols as well, when it comes to the research around this, even from a reading perspective, we are responsible for a lot already. And how students show up on a daily basis, it may be in academics, it may be I need help emotionally, it may be, it's a lot of maybes that comes with the conversation. I just believe that our reporting also matters. And so, you know, the board could ask us for, we want to report on how our behavioral specialists are working, or how our behavioral specialists are doing in our district. Those reports can be brought, you know, based off of a request, and naturally the board president and myself working together to get that on the agenda at an appropriate time. That data also is very important because sometimes, you know, from a research perspective, is one space, but how is it actually working in your own system can be brought through data with your own research internally from a special place based off of what the request is. And so I believe we will be able to bring to you all reports around how this is being impactful. And if it's not, that's a conversation that we need to have as well. That's a space that we would have to operate from. I would want these positions to be very successful. And that will be my goal, to make sure that these positions are successful for our students, families, students, teachers, everyone. And we bring that information back to the board and letting everyone know, hey, it's working and maybe it's not. And so that's a space that we can also work from a research perspective.
Before I circle back around to other board members, Brian Anderson or Mrs. Levy, did either of you have anything you'd like to ask?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Not at the time either.
Okay, thank you. Megan Miller?
Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I feel really in alignment with kind of like where we are in here, so this feels good. Because I think it's really important for us to be unified as we move forward, however we move forward tonight. A couple of things that I want to react to and respond to. One, I think the conversation we just had was such a perfect way to characterize and sort of like this entire effort, right? So like we want to be specific because we want to make sure all of our dollars are in alignment with our vision and goals. We also want to be needs driven. And I love the question that you asked about like, well, what does this look like? Because I think that's what we should be defining, not just tonight, but like as we move these conversations forward, we have to have that clear vision for like what really will change. Like, how will this really truly make a difference? I love that we went there. And I also want to make sure people, like, we want to be as specific as possible. We also have to be flexible based on the kids, right? Because this has to be about the kids and meeting their specific needs. So I wanted to just state that point. I've heard that point a lot, but I wanted to just sort of like label this part of the conversation and clarify that. That's awesome. The other two things I want to point out briefly. One, John Winkleman used to always say, like, relationships, relationships, relationships. So when we talk about, like, what's the difference going to be, bringing more people who want to work with our kids, who have something to offer them, and who have a heart for working with children is automatically going to improve things for kids. Now, that's a really fluffy thing I just said. I realize that. And I don't think we can stop there. I mean, we do need to clearly define more of this vision. But I am so wholeheartedly in support of getting more caring adults with our kids. And I think we have to go into this with a plan for that, but also with just that, like, let's reflect and assess, kind of like, you know, plan, do, study, act, like figure out what's working, what do we need to change. So there's got to be that flexibility built in. So I just want to make sure I really hit that point of relationships, and it's got to be needs driven. The last thing I just want to build off of Mr. Schneider's comment about the behavior piece. So I'm a reading teacher. I work in both proactive reading intervention and also helping kids who have fallen behind and who need support, right? And so just like that, you know, in the behavior example that Greg gave, Mary Studeman, when she first trained us in our reading program back in 2011, she's like, why I want to be a reading teacher, little plug, Mary Studeman's amazing, yay, Mary. The story she told us was how when she was teaching kindergarten, she had this routine every day of saying, you know, A is for apple, apple, and they would go through, you know, different letters, I don't know if it was the week or whatever, and, you know, all the kids are, yeah, okay, cool. And she got to M, and, you know, M is for whatever. And all of a sudden, this little boy just goes, oh, so, that letter matches the sound. And she was like, what? Right? We've been doing this for how many weeks? And so I just want to make the point that as much as we can be clear in redirecting our kids, and some kids, all of our bodies are different. We all learn differently. We all have different needs. And so classroom teachers are competent, amazing human beings, right? But they're not actually magic. And so in order for us to really meet the needs of all of our kids, you have to have the people whose job it is to like make sure we can help those kids who really need that extra, hear it in a different way, experience it in a different way, to be proactive about those behaviors, because we do not want the behaviors to happen, period, right? And so I just wanted to share that. That's the way I understand our behavior specialist piece, but I also agree it has to be flexible and continue to be data-driven, and I love where this conversation has been overall. So thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments on either of these priorities? Okay, then I will finish with a question that I have. So on Tuesday, we heard that one of our district administrators was assigned to teach in a classroom for, I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks, which wonderful opportunity for our students to have such a high level, high quality, high performing educator in the front of the classroom. But that's a very expensive substitute. What are we doing to change and to recruit substitute teachers? I understand that it's very hard to get substitutes post-COVID, but I don't know that, and I love having administrators in the building so that they are seeing and feeling what teachers have to experience. What are we doing to address the issue of classroom coverage when our teachers can't be there?
So I'll be honest with you, we're doing the best we can. You know, my hopes is that we are able to hire and retain what we qualify staff for positions that when these positions do come open for various reasons during the school year, we can keep those people. But when these positions do happen, it does become a scramble for us. Teachers have to teachers have to sub classrooms, administrators have to go into classrooms, executives have to go into classrooms, coaches have to go into classrooms, and we've had to do this a lot in our school district because of our shortages that we do have for various reasons. We had talked about increasing the sub pay. We talked about that too. That's a space, right? And then we talked about splitting classrooms and paying teachers more when that happens. That's a space as well. We've tackled this many different ways. We've tapped into our, below Retired Education Association to ask for help, even in that space as well. We do a lot of different things to make sure the classrooms are covered daily. And I don't have a perfect answer for that. We just have to continue to look at ways in which we can hire and retain our current staff, number one. Retain our current staff, number one, but we also have to be able to recruit better. And when I say better, that's also meaning that maybe we need to, stretch further than, Wisconsin and start looking, more Midwestern spaces to see if we can get more qualified people here, which we do a little bit, but I don't have a perfect answer for that one, Mrs. Johnson. You bring up a great question, but right now we're doing everything we can to make sure that there's a qualified person standing in front of students so that we can reach our academic goals. Mrs. Almendares, is there anything you want to share with that?
Just coincidentally, today we were able to review some of the upcoming career fairs here in Wisconsin. We have the first one slated for February 4th, and they will include not only full-time regular positions, but also help with recruiting for a lot of other positions we have open. It includes UW-Platteville, Purdue University, University of Wisconsin River Falls. So there are quite a few that we just signed up for. In addition, we're also utilizing the services of steady.org. It's an organization that focuses primarily on substitutes. And so through that service, we are identifying opportunities that we can perhaps stretch our reach in getting substitutes into our district.
Thank you. Dr. Garrison, did you want to discuss the facility safety transportation priority?
So we of course aren't able to, in every referendum, you would love to have everything in it, and unfortunately we will not be able to, roll in the conversation the transportation space currently, based off of some of the feedback that we did get from, not only from the board, but our priorities now are, of course, paying our staff, retention, behavioral, and of course, academics. The cost that it will cost to roll over that $500,000 for our students in transportation is something that is not going to go away from my brain. As you all know, I kind of hold on to certain things and try to figure it out. We will still try to work with our city in this space. That's something that will not be included into this referendum. That doesn't mean that I won't, again, be trying to figure out how we can get busing based off of possible some of our surpluses that we have. But that is a space in which we are happen to still work from currently. And as it pertains to our facilities, as mentioned, that's something that we will also be able to really delve into based off of the cost in this referendum. However, that maintenance piece based off of what small, increments that we have could address some very minor things like, siding or lights or something very small. Because again, the savings that we have is only about $400,000 or so.
Are there any board members that have questions or comments for priority 3 facility safety, transportation, and infrastructure upkeep costs? So on the PowerPoint from, I guess, Tuesday, slide 31, the priority 3, the facilities one-time expense, we had $2 million, and the transportation, we had 1.5 million. And don't get me wrong, transportation is important to me, and I graduated from Parkview, Orfordville. I spent an hour and a half on the bus every day. And so I understand transportation, but I also remember there were days when I rode my bike to school, and some days we even walked when it was the elementary school. But this one did come as a surprise regarding the high school transportation. I know when my dad graduated and lived on Alice, they walked to school. And it was just an expectation. Now I understand things are different than 50 years ago, but or even more. I'm more concerned about, personally, more concerned about transportation in terms of elementary and specifically middle school. And middle school, I know we have sports and after-school activities. I want to make certain that our students that want to be involved in those things have that opportunity. So that's just a personal concern of mine. And then in terms of facilities, I am concerned about the lack of green space at Hackett. I would, love to see that, and I understand that this, we, although this is a large referendum, we also don't want to go, too far overboard. It's hard to find that perfect sweet spot of what to request. I know some of the lighting in around the high school could use some improvement. What are your priorities right now in terms of facilities?
Hackett Green Space, not that I had a response real fast there, sorry. But Hackett Green Space is something that is one of my top priorities. I have to do something different there. Just like unfortunately, with putting the ballards down, we figured out how to get that done. And it took me 2 years to save up the money to do those ballards in front of the high school, but we did remove those, concrete and center blocks that's been there for years. The Hackett Green Space will be something that I think from a community project could be something that I want to explore. I've already started to have conversations with, people around, like, can we start looking at donations for some things like this? Because I do want to, number one, Hackett deserves it. That's the best way I can say it. Hackett deserves it. We want to do right by that green space there. So it is one of my top priorities in this space. Our roofing needs are very important to me as well because, our roofs protect our building. If they start to deteriorate, we don't have class, right? That's how it is. If your roof starts to deteriorate, you don't have a home. And so that's why the roofs are very important to our school district, and it's something that we need to take care of. But if I had to put this into a priority perspective, it'll be the Hackett playground and green space. It just needs to be redone. It's unacceptable in every area. We have been talking about doing some upgrades to other spaces, but that Hackett playground would be something that I would like to even tackle through possible community support and donations, in a campaign even this summer. I mean, I have some ideas because I'm always thinking about it, but the Hackett Green Space, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on priority?
And transportation, I'm sorry. And transportation for at least the incoming ninth graders. I know it's $550,000 for everybody, but maybe we can just kind of build it, and so it's a little less money. We do ninth grade, and then we probably do ninth and 10th grade, but it's $550,000 for all to make it happen. But maybe it could be a slow roll conversation. So that's another thing that I believe should be happening for our student population. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to priority 4, any last questions or comments on the priority 3, transportation and facility safety, transportation, and infrastructure upkeep? And our board members online, do you guys have any questions? Sounds like there's none.
Not at this time, but thank you so much for checking.
Thank you, Mrs. Levy. The last.
Thanks for checking in. I do not.
Wonderful. The last priority is priority 4, fund balance restoration. Dr. Garrison?
So fund balance restoration is something that, again, we've had to be real creative with doing over the past few years. Unfortunately, we are set to, not be able to pay our bills. And again, it's been stated multiple times, 26, 27 school years. So that's something that we know that we have to address somehow. Fund balance is not just used, on a daily perspective, but it's used as bills come in as well. And so one of the things that I tell people, we only get paid a couple times during the school year from the city and or from the state. And what happens in between time is we use fund balance to pay bills and to pay staff, payroll, whatever it may be needed for, we use that to do so. We've been lucky not to have to short-term borrow only because we've been depleting our fund balance over the years due to rising costs and inflation. And so I shouldn't even say lucky because right now, again, we're in this position that we're in. So fund balance restoration is something that we've taken a very close look at. I can tell you based off of what you all have in the H2 scenario, the surplus deficit space, we would love to, possibly use those funds in that area and help to kind of replenish our fund balance and to move us closer towards our, excuse me, our 18% policy. Ms. Chade, is that correct? 18%, thank you, 18% policy that we have that's supposed to be guiding us. We're not there at 18%. That's going to take some time to replenish, even going at it the way we're going at it now. I can tell you 27, 28, of course there is going to be a deficit that we have to work from. And that deficit as it stands could be, around that $20 million number. So lining up another referendum, like we stated, is going to be very important. And in that space, if we can make it to that space, barring a referendum being passed, we will be able to possibly redress more fund balance replenishment after people see, of course, our academics getting better, our behaviors getting better over time based off of DPI, report card, things have been progressing in that space. It gives us better credence with our public, right? And that helps to support that next big conversation that could happen 3 to 5 years down the road, which could move us closer to that 18% that we are looking for. So with that being stated, we will not be able to get to 18% based off of this referendum. That's not the possibilities that's laid out in the H2 scenario.
Thank you. Are there any board questions regarding the fund balance priority 4? Seeing and hearing none, I will open the floor for last questions or discussions before we move on to a motion. Mr. Hankins.
Thank you very much. I just want to say a comment that I think it's proper that we are going to referendum and the voters will decide whether we are going to raise this tax levy or not. It's imperative that the decision makers are not this board so much, but it's the people who have to pay the bill. I know everyone's trying to do a good job of educating on why we need it, but as I said before, it's in the hands of the voters, and I think that's where it properly should be. And I just think it's a great exercise of referendums are, actually done by the voters. Thank you.
Brian Nichols.
Thank you, Board President Johnson. If the board will indulge me, I have some historical information to share and and personal information, kind of, and I'd appreciate your indulgence, and hopefully you'll see where I'm going with this. So, 2 years ago, I made a personal commitment to run for the school board. At that time, I made a promise to the people of Beloit who voted for me that I would represent them. I listened to them, I'm a good listener, and I have endeavored to keep my promise to the best of my ability. As we face the question of presenting another request for a referendum, I am torn. On the board this last year, it has been an enormous emotional and difficult task for all of us to cut close to $11 million from the school district budget. It's plain to see that we need the money. Personally, I would love to see our teachers get the raise they deserve most of all. On the other hand, I promise to represent the voters I hear from all over Beloit. Not all, but most people consistently share very negative views about another referendum. I am most concerned that I seem to hear the same thing over and over. Number one, they don't feel heard by the board or the superintendent. They still have questions about what the money is needed for specifically, although we've answered a lot of those questions tonight. They don't trust the board and district to spend the millions of dollars they are asking for, and they are not happy with how the monies from the last referendum were spent. One example that keeps coming up, even almost 2 years later, is the money spent on the remodel of Cunningham, turning it into a new middle school, only to scrap that expensive project, leaving no middle school on the west side of Beloit. That decision alone begs for answers. Some of the questions are, how expensive is it to bus children across the river every day to one of the two middle schools on the east side of Beloit? Did the districts consider the inconvenience to east side families? Did the school district consider the effect of property values on the east side of Beloit that no longer offers a neighborhood middle school? Did the school district think that the west side of Beloit would just forget about their questions and concerns were basically ignored? Well, we got the answer to that last April when 100% of the precincts on the west side voted no for the referendum. As I continue to struggle with these questions myself, and because it is my opinion that asking for a referendum and spending the monies for advertising for that ask before we are assured we have a fighting chance to get the positive answer we need will not just be a wasted expense we can ill afford. Psychologically, it's even more costly. Every time a person says no, they are much more likely to say no the next time. We have had 3 resounding no's to our request for a referendum, and each time the referendum has failed, the no's is stronger than the time before. Perhaps we need to work a little longer answering questions, providing explanations for past actions, and giving me more details about where the requested monies are most needed and will be spent. I've been contacted by probably 3 or 4 people today, and all good conversations, all from the heart, and I was listening a lot. And unfortunately, as we sit here tonight with this information, I can no longer support the amount of money that this district wants from the voters and the taxpayers based on what I'm hearing outside. Now, one of the things that somebody mentioned today, and I think it warrants a discussion and some serious thought, is why don't we do a 1-year referendum to prove to the city and the voters that we can improve this district over the next year, the next school year, and put another referendum on the ballot next spring based on improved academic achievement, behavioral retaining of teachers. And to do that, I would advocate that we look at the former K scenario, which has a 4% increase plus $1 million additional. That's $8,050,000. Gives us a surplus at the end of the year of $811,000. It could be more if we don't use all the $1 million. And that runs at a mill rate of 7.15, which reduces tax burden a little bit. Someone told me in one of these conversations that the average home income is $56,000. I don't know if I haven't had a chance to check that information to see if that's valid. But if that is valid, then obviously I think there are a lot of community members that would struggle with, you know, a 7.53 referendum. I mean, a mill rate. So scenario K again goes to 4% for the teaching staff, including pairs, and then I would also suggest that we use a little bit of OPEB money to give the teachers a bonus to make up the other 1%, because we've all been looking at 5%. So I think that made a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying that's anyway. That's it. That's my suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Megan Miller, your hand is up.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments and your thinking. I mean, that's going to the voters to ask for a referendum is a huge deal. We've spent a lot of time, obviously here, but outside of these meetings, right? I mean, yeah, no one can doubt it's a huge undertaking. I have a lot of empathy for what you shared, particularly when we think about, you know, the grand scheme of how difficult just like everyday life is right now. When I ran for school board the first time, I ran to represent the community, and specifically the community's opinion and needs and vision for what we do for our children. So we're never going to find an overwhelming community consensus on such a huge topic because there's so much nuance. And so at the end of the day, while I don't doubt that you had really good conversations with people whose perspectives deserve our respect, we've also heard from people who have shown up here, who have reached out to others of us offline as well, who have given us a clear directive that's been delineated in all of these slides. It's not an easy decision. The West Side School closure is something that I still feel a lot about. Sometimes there's just you're between a rock and a hard place, right? And that's why we have elected people like us and others are willing to step in and just try to problem solve through those adversity situations. Ultimately, we're here to do what's best for our students, and the community has given us a very clear vision for what they'd like to see for our kids. It's not to say that if somebody doesn't vote in support of the referendum that they don't care about our kids. Like you just described beautifully, it's so nuanced, and there's such a range of situations and perspectives that go into these decisions, right? So I don't want to discount anything you said. But all of us chose to run for this office to represent the community with a focus on what is best for children here. The dollars invested in our kids today is the literal future of our community. If we hadn't heard so clearly and definitively and consistently from people over these last several years exactly what they want and need, I might feel a little more uncertain as well. But I feel very firm and very confident stepping forward to say that what our administration has worked with us to propose is solidly what voters who are interested in supporting a referendum want. So again, I just want to be really clear. All of these feelings and thoughts are totally valid. It's so important that we have that perspective because, like Dr. Garrison said earlier, there's still so much more networking work to be done with the community. I would love to shave off that $180,000, make some connections, get some volunteer caring grown-ups working with their kids on reading. There is so much potential in this district, and we have an amazing community. An amazing community. And I will never lose faith or hope in our community, despite of how these elections turn out. But we owe it to the people who have voiced their support for a referendum and have been so clear and so consistent in painting the vision for what they want to see for all of our children in our district. We owe it to them to follow through. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any other board members wanting to weigh in? Mr. Hankins?
Yes, and this is very heartful, fruitful discussion. And what Mr. Nichols brought up is just another option. I know it's late in the game, but I think Brian brings up a very valid point, and so does Ms. Miller. Dr. Garrison has told me from day one when I stepped into his office after I got on board, that about referendums, we don't want to go to referendum to lose. We want to go to referendum to win. And why go through all this exercise if we have the feeling that it's not going to pass? Brian brings up some very good points. And yes, there's a lot of yes voters, but there's also a lot of no voters. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think, I think it's very fruitful that we are discussing what different option. I know, like I said, it's late in the game, but if our biggest goal is to pass a referendum, I think we have to listen to everybody. And I think what Megan, what we all say here means a lot. The voters will choose in the end, but if we, I'm going to start rambling a little bit, but I just think that those are very valid points. The yes voters, but remember, there's a lot of no voters, and we have to appease them too. And maybe by doing some of the things that Brian just brought up, and I know it's late in the game, I don't know if it makes it more palatable or not. I don't know. We don't know. We do not know. We hear things, but we don't. We're not going to be in the ballot box when everyone votes. And again, it's who votes and what they say. And that's why I'm very happy, or I'm very satisfied that this is a referendum that the voters choose. It isn't a directive from the board. It's something put out there by admin and the board, and they say yes or no. So it's the voters who choose. I just want to give credence to what Mr. Knuckles said, what we all say, But again, in the end of the day, if we're trying to pass a referendum, then we need to talk about these different scenarios and at least discuss them. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that we're nitpicking. I just think that the idea in the end is to pass a referendum. That's what I've heard since day one. So I think that's very valid points are being made. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hankins. Mr. Schneider.
Okay. Like Mr. Nichols said, I've also heard from people, some who have said point blank they will never support a referendum. But I've also heard from a lot of others that continually say, this is what we need to do in this district. We're not going to be able to cut our way to the top. I mean, at some point, after we've already cut, actually it's not 11 million, it's actually 21 million in the last couple of years out of the budget. To have to cut any more is definitely going to impact what we're trying to do. We're not going to be able to do everything that everybody is saying we need to do if we don't have the ability in order to do that. The budget that we've talked about and the requests that are here are addressing everything that the community has said they want us to do in the district. And while I agree that maybe they may like a shorter referendum period, but we didn't get to the position we're in overnight. It took years. It's not going to get out of where we are in 1 year either. We have made continual gains over the last couple of years. We need to continue that. But we're not going to be where everybody wants at the end of next year. But we need to continue making those steps and progress to move forward to get us to where we're going to be in the future. I mean, we've got great leadership in the district and moving us forward to achieve what we need to achieve. We need to get behind them and support them and give them the tools that they need to get the district to where everybody wants it. And we're in that progress to do it now. This referendum that we're looking at is putting into the referendum, will allow us to do what the community has asked us to do. I think going back and starting looking at something much different, maybe have some options, but it's also taking away what the community has asked us that we need to accomplish.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I do, but I want to give other board members a chance.
Okay, I'm going to just throw this out there because it was a good point. The median household income in 2023 dollars between 2019 and 2023 for the city of Beloit was $59,975. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. That's really helpful, and thank you for sharing that. That's helpful. I guess just 2 points. One, as I'm thinking more about Vice President Nichols' comments, when we had our input sessions, I was at the one here that one Saturday and then the one at the library. I sat with people both times who in the past, or not necessarily sat with in the Monday one, but spoke with people at the Monday one, who did not vote in previous referendums to support, but who showed up to share their thoughts. So to say that we didn't receive feedback, though, from like the no voters isn't entirely accurate. Now, certainly not every single person, and that doesn't take it all away from what was just shared. But I did just want to note, it's not like we had 2 rooms packed full of people who were already just in support. So I did want to bring that point in. While it would be awesome if we had like the magic wand to make everything totally palatable to everybody, the first commitment that we have is to our kids, and these are important pieces of information to consider. Regardless of what we do and how much elasticity we have to try to accommodate as much as we can, there absolutely will be people who vote no. It is impossible statistically and probably impossible to put something on an April ballot and have everybody who shows up to vote yes. So I want us to also stay grounded, just like I'm hearing like we need to be realistic about our ask, right? That's another part of that realism that I want us to stay grounded in, because you stretch, I'll quote Fiddler on the Roof, if you stretch so far, you'll break, right? You can only stretch so far. Lastly, I don't know if anybody feels like clicking around, but I went back to a previous board meeting. I think it's the November 19th one. I already lost the date. But when we got our state report card presentation, it's on slide 13. I'm happy to share it out. When people are talking about seeing results, we've now seen 3 years of year-over-year growth, and I want to just be really clear because I know there's some conversation about not being able to compare a couple of years to this previous year, like this 23-24 school year in comparison to other schools in the same year. We outpaced the entire state of Wisconsin in academic growth. So our rate of growth, our rate of progress was higher than most school districts in the state of Wisconsin, just in that 1 year. Just want to be clear, I'm not comparing year to year, because I know there were some changes. So, I mean, that in addition to the year-over-year growth for 3 years is evidence of improvement. We also heard at that meeting that because of the orientation of our schools and how it used to just be the K through 3, that has been a hindrance to how those scores are calculated. And next year, we're anticipating a bump anyway, because now we'll have enough years of that K through 5, 6 through 8 model that work better, right, with like how the maths out for that. Lastly, I just want to point out on that same PowerPoint, which I'm happy to share with the board and if folks at home, let me just make sure what meeting this is. Oh, sorry, yeah, it's the November 19th board meeting. It's item, item 6A is where I found the PowerPoint. Slide 15. It talks about our state assessment forward for ELA for 3rd grade, went up 9.8. I mean, it's just like slide after slide of growth. Now, does that erase the work we have to do? Does that say there's, oh no, everything's hunky-dory? Of course not. But we have to speak truthfully about the repair that needs to occur and the great stuff that's happening. And if we don't speak like some hope and some pride into our kids and into our community, like what are we even doing here? So again, we had a mix of people with different opinions, different perspectives, different household incomes reach out to us, show up in person for weeks and months and year over year to tell us what they want and what they need. They've asked us to show growth, and we've shown growth. The work's not done. We got a whole lot more growth to do, a whole lot. And it's going to take the resources and the funds to continue to grow into the vision that we all want to see. So, thank you.
Ms. Miller, one of the things I want to just add, thank you for adding those points. As we continue to build trust, there's value added that we, of course, we still are trying to get to on all of our state report cards, as you are aware. The goal, of course, in every school district is to continue to move in the right direction. And although we have not met the metrics that we want to see internally yet, as well as externally on state test, our goal is still to keep moving in that direction. And that's something that, from a public perspective, I would want people to really to understand, because when we start really talking about growth and we start talking about value added, it gets lost. People may not understand all of how we get to that point. But we do know we want to get better. And our metrics internally, you typically see increase internally before you see it happen on the state test. I also don't like to put a whole lot of weight on everything that comes from just the state test, because it's like there's other days in which our students are learning and doing great. But we are held accountable to this one test that happens on a day and sometime in March, and everything is weighted that way. And so I just want to make sure the public understands that we still want to move in the right direction. We know that we are not meeting the growth that we want to see across the board. And then we know there's value added that we haven't met as well. But I do believe, with continued support from everybody, and that's including the board, the community, staff, students working their butts off like they always do, we will start to see that growth that we, have started to see over time. And again, like I've always stated, we're not there yet. We still have a ways to go. Our metrics do show that, we do have some opportunities for growth, and that's just where we are right now. And so I do appreciate your thoughts, Mrs. Miller, but I also don't want people to get, like I said, when we start talking about growth, they may not understand all of the intricacies to that, and then it becomes a matter of, are we being transparent again, or do we believe what we're saying? And so I just want to let people know that we do have a ways to go, still yet to go. We still want to keep that improvement moving in this direction, and with the support of the community, we will be able to to do so. I do need to speak to Mr. Nichols' statement. Mr. Nichols, thank you for sharing your perspective on scenario K. Scenario K that you're referring to, I might need to, just for viewing purposes, pull it up so that everyone can see it. Give me a second. Oh, maybe not. Sorry. Scenario K that you're referring to gave us the 715 mill rate of about 4% for the 4 years, with $1 million of additional opportunities each year. You mentioned a 1 year opportunity that brought in that $800,000, giving us a little over $810,000 in surplus for that 1 year. Please note that a scenario in 1 year puts us right back in that same conversation the following year with deficit. It's not built into this scenario, but if we only had a 1 year referendum the following year, again, we will be right back in this same conversation. having to still save or make reductions because we gotta get to that following year. And in that space, we right back in that possible $8.9 million conversation, because that's if we did nothing on that base part at the top of that page you're looking at, we're right back at $8.9 million plus of reductions that we have to have. That's starting in January. Because the $8 million that you're saying for 1 year gets us through this year because we have a deficit. But starting in January, we have to come back and line ourselves up for 26, 27, which is another $9 million worth of reductions. We can't sustain the up down, because again, that's going to drop us back down again, that instability of the mill rate. And I understand, the thought process with the 1 year. The first time we came to this conversation, we tried for the 1 year space. For the 1 year space. Just let you all know that the first time in this conversation, we tried a 1 year space. Then we did a 2 year, and both opportunities failed. Okay? And so I understand that, and I know you made the statement, which is accurate as it pertains to the West Side not voting no. East Side also voted a lot of no's this past referendum. So just to be very transparent again, it's not just the East Side, just not West Side, East versus West, but the reality is this past referendum, they also voted no. East Side did as well. I don't have the precincts in front of me to give you the accurate data there, but I can tell you, I know the majority of the East Side precincts also voted no. And so this is hard. Board, I understand this is hard. This is, like I mentioned all along, from the beginning, this was going to be hard. But I think along the way, we were landing in a space, some of which, you brought to the table, Mr. Nichols. Some of the scenarios that we spoke about were scenarios that we want to bring back based off of some of your input. H1 was based off of your input. H2 was based off of kind of the board's input. And we did that because we heard from the board. And so that's the space that I want to also just address. And again, I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that both East and West Side, unfortunately, in the precinct's perspective, it was a lot of no's in that space. And we did try for that 1 year. The board decided to do a 2 year in year one, and it also was a no. And the first year that we went to referendum 2 years ago, not to confuse anybody, but what was on the paper when we first started from the ad hoc committee was a 1 year, and then the board decided to move it to a 2 year, same request, but for 2 years, and of course it barely wasn't successful, and then of course last year, and here we are now.
Thank you, Dr. Gerritsen. Brian Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, just to give feedback on Board Member Nichols' comments, I think, we look back at, the first referendum, our second year's referendums, and I agree. I had supported 1 year referendums under the auspices of let's ask for the minimum amount, prove it out, and earn the right to ask for more. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to do that because we didn't try for the 1 year, like Dr. Gerritsen just said. So I can fully support the logic of that, and could still support, something this time around that says, hey, we're going to ask. Maybe we're asking for less than what we want, what we need, what we've heard. Because we're not supporting the full wish list. Maybe it's still 3 years, maybe it's not. But there's a danger in going too low as well. And I think not so much with dollar amount, but by timeline. So I think where I could get on board with a lower dollar amount, the time frame I wouldn't want to shrink up. I think some stability there would, or lack of stability if you go less than 3 years. At this point, I supported 1 year each of the last two times. I think at this point it probably should be longer. So I would just say, I think as we've worked through this process, I can get on board with what you're saying. But on the 16th of January, we also have to come to a consensus. So I just want to make sure we're moving this process forward versus internally coming up with, well, what if? Because we could what if ourselves past January 21st and not have a question on the ballot at all. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Brian Anderson. Brian Nichols, your hand is raised.
Just want to clarify a couple of things. Number one, my comments do not preclude me from working my you-know-what off, knocking on doors, talking to people at Walmart, Menards, wherever that, we need help. The district needs help, and now's the time. So I just want to share that with everybody. But again, I take the duties that I signed up for seriously, and I take the people that I represent seriously too. And they have serious comments and serious concerns, and that's what I brought to you. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for the extra time, and I appreciate all you guys. I really do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian Nichols. Any other board questions or comments? So I attended last night's ad hoc committee meeting, and my takeaway message from that meeting last night, all of us in this room and the cabinet members that are not in this room, we've got our work cut out ahead of us. We all know the dire financial need of the district. We're asking a lot of our constituents, of our families, and it's an unfortunate situation that we are in now. We would all love to not be here, but we all need to be the strong leaders that we have within ourselves to be. Our students deserve it. Our staff deserve it. We need to have consistency from the top down throughout the entire system. We have to have respect for one another. We have to support one another. I think I made these comments last May when I took this seat, and I'm saying them again now because there are over 5,000 reasons we should be voting for this referendum. 5,000 plus the 800 employees that we have as well. I hear their stress, their burdens, and it's really unfortunate then when we in this room are not reflecting what we want to see in our very own district. We have 2.5 months to go out there and earn the trust and the respect of our constituents. I look at this referendum when I'm wearing my board hat, and yeah, hey, we need this. We have to do this. But I also am a realist, and I've got bills. I'm not making a whole hill of beans sitting up here as a board member. None of us are, regardless of what the public may think. We aren't. This is a lot of hours that we are putting forth. This is the 4th night in a row I am at a meeting in this building. We still can do better, and we have to do better. My suggestion, my personal suggestion, is between now and April 1st, the administration think about what more can we do I know it feels like we've done everything we can, like we have given all the blood, sweat, and tears we possibly can, but I know that there is more we can do. What other reductions can be made? I will say it's very hurtful as a board member when we are disrespected by the cabinet publicly. That needs to stop. We appreciate our cabinet members. We don't attack our cabinet members. We ask questions because we are curious, because we care. We need to work together better. So all 7 of us, all 4 or 5 of you guys, I am tasking you, I am asking you, I am pleading, let's all do better together because our students deserve it. Let's show our public we are putting our students and our teachers first. With that, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit by $9,170,000 for the 2025-2026 school year, by $14,120,000 for the 2026-27 school year, and by $16,950,000 for the 27-28 school year for non-recurring purposes consisting of operational and maintenance expenses, including teacher and staff compensation and academic and behavioral resources.
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
Motion by Greg Schneider, seconded by Amy Levy. Any discussion? Ms. Miller.
Yeah, I just want to kind of honor the space, and I just want to just offer some gratitude to everybody, you know, in the room, virtually, everybody who's put the work into this. As we've just experienced very much in real time tonight, this is really hard, emotionally, mentally, psychologically for everybody. And that's not like oh, woe is us. This is a huge thing, and I'm just very grateful to everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Anyone else?
Say this real quick.
Oh, Dr. Garrison.
Sure, I would like to appreciate the school board for their, candor and of course their space in this work. Like I said, this is hard work. I take full responsibility for any actions that, comes from, my team to the board. I also take full responsibility
I hate to interrupt, but just point of order, since we are in the discussion for the motion, the discussion should really stay on the motion that's on the floor.
Sure.
Not that these other things shouldn't be addressed. I just don't think this is the moment.
Sure, and what I was going to say to that, Mrs. Levy, was that this work is hard. Whatever the motion is in this space, I appreciate the work of the team, the cabinet, and of course the board working through this space. And thank you for correcting me as well.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Thank you, Mrs. Levy. Any other discussion on the resolution?
If a roll call is not if it's not required, I'm requesting one, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it is required. Anyone else? Anyone online? I'm seeing none. Mrs. Shope, a roll call, please.
Certainly. Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Nay.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-1.
The next item on the agenda is the resolution providing a referendum election on the question of approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit by $9,170,000 for the 25-26 school year and by $14,120,000 for the 26-27 school year and by $16,950,000 for the 27-28 school year for non-recurring purposes. For procedure purposes, Ms. Miller, do I read the resolution before the motion or after?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Shope or our parliamentarian, Ms. Levy. I would assume before.
The policy says that you really only have to read the title of the motion, of the resolution, which is what you have read. And then the part that goes on with the consisting of operation and maintenance, et cetera, is just part of the motion to make it clear for everybody.
Okay, so the policy I'm looking at is 183 Rule 1 and number 3. It says, in the interest of administrative efficiency, the reading of resolutions verbatim into the record as required by Robert's Rules of Order may be waived by a majority vote of the board, and such resolutions may then be read into the record by title only. So we would need a motion. It's a 2.5-page resolution. If board members want me to read it, I will. If somebody wants to make a motion, either way, I'm good.
I move that we waive the reading of the entire resolution and just go with the title.
Second.
We have a motion to waive the reading of the full resolution and just the title by Greg Schneider, seconded by Amy Levy. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
roll call.
opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously, and my apologies, I forgot to ask for discussion. Okay, so with that then, may I get a motion for approval of the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion for approval of the resolution as is by Greg Schneider, seconded by Amy Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, may I clarify, did you want the extended information with the operation and maintenance expenses, or did you want it cut off at just the title for the actual motion?
Meaning you're looking at the recommended action? Yes, because we will need all of that, because that is the, am I looking at the same thing here? Yes, yeah, we need all of it in there.
Okay. That's the way it comes up for me on board docs, but I wanted to make sure that you were all aware that all of that would be in there.
So, Mr. Schneider, for clarification then, so your motion then is everything that I had read earlier, plus where it continues for non-recurring purposes consisting of operational and maintenance expenses, including teacher and staff compensation and academic and student behavioral resources.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Megan Miller,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Nay.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
and Greg Schneider,
Aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-1.
Thank you, Ms. Shope. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Megan Miller, seconded by Brian Nichols. Any discussion? Dr. Anderson?
that's fine.
Dr. Garrison?
Sure. Since we're at the adjournment place, since there was a possible meeting that was posted for tomorrow, you do need to announce that'll be canceled at this point. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. So there will not be a meeting tomorrow. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Have a good evening.